This is the A to Z podcast. Zach Jackson, Andre Knott, at Akron Jackson, at Dre Knott on most of your favorite social media platforms. A to Z podcast.com, facebook.com/A to Z podcast. Shouts as always to Scene, to the Honeymoon Grill, to American Fireworks, AmericanFireworks.com. All of those, including you guys listening who have supported us for a long time. It is Labor Day weekend in a couple of days. American Fireworks is back open. Their standard hours, maybe even longer hours. They are open all the time at AmericanFireworks.com. Dre, first, good morning, but before I let you talk, I had a thought the other day. So, obviously everybody's...
Wait. I forgot something. Happy birthday. We've let your birthday slide by in this unbelievable year.
Well, I'm too old to celebrate birthdays.
And that's what you wanted. It just hit me as we were doing this. We got through your birthday without anybody ever recognizing or realizing you just got old as shit.
Yeah, well, I've been old as shit since I've been about 24-ish. So
I would say 18, but yeah, same difference.
No, you didn't know 18-year-old Zach. I'm glad a lot of people didn't. So a few who listened did. But
Zach in his 20s is all I needed to know.
Yeah, so obviously everybody's routines and lives have been, disrupted these last 6-ish months. So, one of the things for me was podcasts, and not only us doing it, and we kind of agreed long ago that until we have stuff to talk about, it doesn't need to be that big of a priority, right? And then over the last X amount of weeks, we've been back in our jobs, which has been a huge adjustment. But, I would have a number, probably 4 to 5 regular podcasts where I wouldn't miss, right? I might catch up a week late, but I wouldn't miss. And then I would have another 4 to 5 that, depending on if I was working, walking, chilling, whatever I would do. Well, I was sitting here the other day in this exact spot, and this is why I thought of this. And it was time to just block out the world for 2 or 3 hours and get some writing done and get caught up on some things. And so I started going back trying to catch up on some of my podcasts. And the first thing I do is fast forward through the first couple minutes because I'm trying not to hear the introductions, the reads, the bullshit that goes on.
Right.
So then I know people do that for us, which is fine. So I just was curious if you do the same thing.
Oh, yeah. At least with ours. And look, they have those people that they pay a lot of money to go to radio stations and tell bad radio hosts how to be better. And they're not because they just aren't talented enough. And that's one of the things they tell them is, stop with your common starts, get right into sports. I think some podcasts have fun beginnings that I will listen to, but absolutely there are podcasts where I just jump to 5 minutes in because I don't care about, what you think is funny and saying hello. I think our intro is funny because obviously with our podcast, there's always some sinister backstory as to why we do things a certain way. And I think at one time I used to open up the podcast 6-7 years ago, and I would be going a mile a minute trying to get everything in. And then once we found out that certain radio station program directors didn't think you were seasoned enough, our middle finger back to them was to let you start the podcast and let you show that you could.
I forgot about that.
I don't forget that type of stuff. And that kind of became the way we began.
That really was an insulting thing. Yes,
it is. But you got to realize though that same. I'm gonna be careful. But that radio station still has hosts that can't host their own show. So therefore, you tell me who's getting themselves better. And I ain't trying to fight with everybody trying to be mean. That's just a fact. That's just a bona fide fact. Beginning a podcast can be weird. And trying to find subjects and how to go into subjects, always a little different. I will say this. Because sports have been so goofy this year, just because the world's been so goofy this year, it's funny you brought up listening to different podcasts and things of that nature. I have caught up myself listening to podcasts that I never thought I would listen to before. And I'm going to give you 2 names of podcasts. Like when I cut the grass yesterday, I have been listening, and I'm going to sound like a company man. If you listen to this podcast, you know I'm not a company man to any of the companies that pay me. But iHeartMedia has a podcast on the Piketon Massacre. You remember 3
Yeah, you know what?
It's
funny because I've heard the commercials for that and I want to listen to this, but I haven't yet.
Yes. And it is, and look, I usually listen. Look, I listen to Darius Miles and Quentin Richardson do podcasts. So it's not like I'm looking for the intelligence of all the world to blow me away on a podcast. But the Piketon Massacre podcast has been really good. And you know what it led to me to yesterday? Because I was actually frustrated because I was like, damn, I'm out of the Pikes massacre. What should I move on to? iHeart also has one on the Gold Club. Remember the Gold Club down in Atlanta?
I've heard some stories.
Yeah. Well, they've got a great one on the Gold Club that I started yesterday. It's called Racket Gold Club. And it's funny you bring up the beginnings because obviously when you're talking about the Gold Club, the title for the first one that I used to listen to yesterday is called Asshole Naked. How could I not listen to Asshole Naked as the first podcast for the Racket Gold Club? Asshole Naked. Yes, I'm giving them some love. It has been very interesting to hear this very polite woman try to do this podcast about strip club and explain to you Asshole Naked.
Yeah, so since we're here, for many years, and obviously, like podcasting, it has boomed. It's booming still. It's certainly, I don't think has reached its peak, but it has boomed over the last couple of years and continues to. One thing you and I have talked about sometimes in front of the microphones and off is like doing like documentaries or being more involved in longer form things, right? So,
right.
I think that not only was podcasting not really huge 5-6 years ago. But the thought that you could do that because we had, maybe not gotten to the idea of a formal pitch. And then, you're on TV all the time. But unfortunately, that TV station has a limit of people under 65 that they can have at the same time on some of their shows. But like we could do, more like storytelling podcasting like that. Right.
Right.
It's not the format that we've used. Right. But,
but we could do it.
I do like
if
those.
It came to it. Right, absolutely. I mean, and this is where A to Z probably could use the right. I don't want to say producer. I guess you could use the word because, like, I see the Browns are going back and doing their like top 5 games since they returned, and Jen and I chuckled the other day because ABC, or the local ABC network, was showing the Browns game from 2007, I believe, or no, from 2008 when they played the Giants on Monday Night Football, and Braylon Edwards showed everybody he was an acrobatic and came up. That's an inside joke on top of an inside joke. And it's amazing that 2008 HDTV was so bad compared to what we have today.
Yes.
But it was funny because we had it on for like 2 seconds, and Jen goes, "You were on the sideline for that game?" And I go, "Yeah." She goes, "Man, you and Zach were real assholes back then." And I just turned the channel. But like I thought to myself, I was like, and it goes off of what you're saying. I was like, if we had like somebody that put all of our thoughts and ideas and somehow put them in a list, we could do a hell of a podcast on like that game. And that's not taking anything away from the guys that do the show and the dog pound or dog puppy or dog whatever they do. But we were there. Like we could go through that 2000. There are things that we've seen in life that we could do a very educational podcast that would be entertaining without us bringing up Asshole Naked. To get reviews.
No, I agree. Now some of that, I know that's going on league wide, and some of it is these teams have these rich contracts with these TV providers, and I mean, for 3 Browns preseason games, I mean that means a lot to Channel 5, right? And
absolutely.
Then the preseason games get whacked, and they need something. Like I know just following it across the league. They've broadcast scrimmages or they've done other specials or things like that. Take it from someone who wrote a book on the first 20 years of the Browns. Like the list of great memorable moments is pretty fucking short, right?
Yeah. I mean, and at some point, maybe when we get older and we actually recognize your birthday and my birthday, but we won't for about 10, 15, 20 more years, that should be something that we should look into, though, just doing podcasts where we can give the history. I think that's been a kind of a cool thing to do this year, though, has it not? To find people that can podcast or talk, or what do they call those? Like the when they write about, where they break down like a whole situation and they write. I can't think of the word of it right now, but they are interesting in this time of the year. I'll think about it at like 10 o'clock tonight when I'm trying to figure out why Frankie Lindor doesn't hit with runners in scoring position. That's a whole other conversation.
Yes, the joys.
But I do think it's, and you make a great point, and I'm glad because now I'm watching football go through what we kind of went through in baseball. And it frustrated us because, as you said, you have these huge TV deals amongst teams and TV networks. And the main thing that these TV networks, and Andre has to be very careful right now because I got to get my last 20 games in one way or the other. It's a business, right?
Yeah.
And Channel 5, they can talk about being family, and I'm just using them as an example. We could be talking about the Cowboys. We could be talking about anybody. We can talk about, being a family and being together, and maybe we do some nonprofit stuff, together and raise some money for people. But let's be honest, it's a business deal. Channel 5 didn't go in to spend millions of dollars to be the Browns, preseason broadcasting partner for, to do charity work. They did that to make money.
Or to show building the Browns, right. Right.
Yeah. And you know what? That show actually, I don't watch it a lot. It's actually not terrible.
No, it's a great show. They do a great job with the resources and restrictions on that. Of course, it's not an unfiltered really Hard Knocks. It's a team show, right?
Yes. And you know what though? It is built perfectly for the fan. Like it's a good show to kind of get. I mean, especially in a year like this when you can't go to training camp, you can't as a fan and see anything. I get it. Those are the shows that should have the cheerleaders and should be the pop. They're not going to break down the defense and break down why a guy sucks and why a guy is in here in Cleveland. But it's a good enough show if you're a fan. I got no problem with it. But I mean, we went through this in baseball where we had all these great ideas for shows and great ideas for different things we could do. And then you just realize that what they pay for production to do TV games and the games just cost so much that they weren't going to just run us out and put us on TV and waste money. Yeah. They would rather play a game 15 times over that we already know about because that is easier on the pockets of the TV production.
Well, I think what's cool about podcasting, and we're talking about us here, but we're talking to the listener as always. Like, it's so individualized, right? Like, if you're into certain things, like you can find a podcast, and you listen to radio, and even the good shows or even the good segments, like you just might not be interested in a certain guest, or they might devote the 20-minute segment to a certain thing, and it's not for you. Whereas on a podcast, you just press fast forward. Or you listen to, like I listened to a Rosillo pod, and I think he's really good, and it's one of my favorites. Like, he had 3 guests on one. I listened to the first. I wasn't interested in the second. I fast-forwarded and listened to the third, the other day while I was writing. And I think that's, kind of how it goes. Like, just for example, I am carving out some time in my day here for the simple reason of we have a fantasy football draft on Sunday, the Galley Boys. Mm-hmm. So I have a fantasy football pod queued up. So I'm going to carve out 40 minutes or so to get my fat ass off the couch, go for a walk or whatever, and listen to that podcast then. So
you're going to have to motivate me on that. I'll be honest. I haven't been overly motivated on fantasy football, and I don't maybe it's just a year, but we got I just haven't, and maybe that's what I need to do. I heard a segment on a radio station the other day, and I kind of just rolled my eyes. But, it's weird right now. I'm just being honest. And it's going to be weird to draft, and you'll be good at it. I know you will be. Some people are going to take advantage of just knowing what they know when it comes to fantasy football. And some people are going to be – this is going to be a weird fantasy football season if everything goes through right? Because it's like if without seeing anyone play and see how they set things up, I remember I heard on the Bull was doing an interview yesterday with some CBS fantasy guy, and they were talking about sleeper running backs. And to me, you can win fantasy leagues if you know the third string running back that'll be playing, all of October and November, right? Like, it's easy in Cleveland to know who the backup running back is and who could get you, 8 catches a game or whatever else in Kareem Hunt.
Sure.
But who knows who the New York Giants or Jacksonville Jags, especially with Jacksonville just cutting Leonard Fournette. Look, and I'm glad you actually brought this up because you actually got me wanting to actually talk fantasy football, and I haven't wanted to all year long. I haven't. I'm being honest. Like, I just haven't. This has been a different year. But like a guy like Fournette, somebody's going to pick him up, don't you think? Like, he's not going to just sit and watch football like us.
Right.
Somebody's going to pick him up at some point in time, Or is Benny Snell a guy that becomes like I guess what I'm saying is, that's when people like you and I enjoy watching preseason games. We're the ones that are willing to watch the fourth quarter because we're watching some running back that we knew about in high school or we knew when they were playing in college and they're finally getting their shot. I think it's going to be hard to find those sleepers for the average fan because that's how you win these fantasy leagues.
Sure.
Is knowing the third, fourth running back that may pop up because of the injuries to the first 2.
Yeah. Listen, for as much as a football geek as I am, and there has been years I've been successful in fantasy football. There's been years I've been awful in fantasy football, right?
Yeah.
One time, Jerome Harrison hit me the jackpot. Remember that December he had in 09?
Yes, yes.
Like record setting?
Yes.
I picked him up. It was brilliant. Nobody.
He's got a jersey in the Hall of Fame because of that.
I'm not sure at his draft on August 31st that Jerome Harrison's uncle picked Jerome Harrison, right? But by December 16th, he was carrying it 33 times a game.
He was toting that thing. That's the one thing Eric Mangini likes. White linebackers, a little running back, small as Oh, man.
Jerome had that. What did Jerome have? The brain tumor? I hope he's doing well.
I hope he's doing well. I was going to say shout out to Armani Bryant. I just read a story on him as well.
Yeah.
Former Browns that are dealing with some physical ailments and things of that nature. So it's a tough story. I mean, the Jerome Harrison one just crushed me a couple of years ago. I wish we knew more information on how he is today. But our thoughts and prayers go out to him and his family because Jerome was a really good dude. A quick story. After I was no longer the Browns sideline reporter anymore and I had to go to Strictly Radio for a little while, my man Scott Smoot, who now works for the WWE and works for the Cavs, and he's if you know him, you know him, and nobody's like Smoot. So one night after we got tanked, and I was in depression mode 101, basically drank till 3 in the morning downtown Cleveland and prayed to get home, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, dog, I gotta put a tape together. I gotta get out of this funk. I can't just, sit back and be pissed off. So Smoot goes, Dre, get some of your tapes. He's like, get some of your videotapes that you've done for your Browns TV and your STO work. Put it all together. Meet me at the Q. It was the Q at the time, and he was like one of the producers for one of their shows. And he was like, when I get done with work, I'll get you in, and we'll go sit in my office, and we'll make you a demo tape. And the demo tape started. My demo tape that I have not updated now in over 12 years, which is crazy to say this, in 12 to 10 years. But the demo tape started with me interviewing Jerome Harrison at training camp. And our running statement between anytime I get a new job or anytime something happens in my life, Smoot texts me, training camp, like, because that was the answer that Jerome Harrison gave me to start my demo tape, was an interview of me and Jerome Harrison. And Jerome Harrison, I was like, so how you feeling, Dre? How you feeling, Jerome? And Jerome's like, Dre, you know how it is. Training camp. And that's how my demo tape.
That's exactly how you talked.
That is exactly, I swear to God, my demo tape, if I could find it right now, it starts with Jerome Harrison saying, Dre, training camp.
Well,
and then it goes to Josh Cribbs. So that's how I got my jobs in TV.
One quick note is that Jerome Harrison is obviously our obscure Cleveland Brown of the week here. We had a sponsor for that segment last year during the season. We don't this year, hint, hint. Two things, though, on that. One, at that stage of our lives, a lot of great ideas were born at 3 a.m., right? Some not so great, but a lot of them were. And two, I'm sure that was a great way to lead your reel because you and Jerome saw right eye to eye. You're both 5'5.5" in shoes.
Yes, we saw eye to eye on things.
No, but
I knew that was coming.
Here's my actual best Jerome Harrison story. So 09, when he breaks that record, right, and has that big month, that was my last year working for the Browns, right? I left in March 10, so the 09 season was it. So in 10, at the end of the year, the Browns had traded him at the trade deadline, for like a 7th or, whatever. Mm-hmm. So that December, I went to my first Browns game in a long time just as a fan. Went with a bunch of friends in a limo. It was like someone's going away party or something like that. Just a bunch of 30-ish or younger or a little older acting 18-ish idiots going up to a Browns game. Well, it was freezing cold. The team was terrible, but we've all seen this movie before. So The limo is parked right behind the stadium, and there's not even any push to leave because there's so little traffic, right? And this guy walks up, and he's like, I got tickets, and we buy 2 tickets for $10, me and my friend Pat, as we're sitting there getting our winter clothes on in the back of this limo, and on the ticket is Jerome Harrison, who had been traded 4 weeks before. And that was a whole different ownership regime ago. So.
Right. I mean, that's the Browns. That's our squad. I remember that time in your life. There's been some time, man. See what we could do some. We could break down that game he had in Kansas City, and we could do a podcast where we get Jerome and we get Josh Cribbs, because both of their jerseys went to the Hall of Fame because of that game in Kansas City.
Yeah.
And I remember you and I went out to dinner the night before, and it ended up at the hotel bar because Deke, and I cannot, and Spencer, I know you listen and I love you. And I know your son just had his birthday, because Deke sent me a picture this morning of his grandkid, and I said, thank God he looks like his grandma, not his ugly grandpa. And I got a middle finger texted back to me from Deke, because I love him. But I remember we came back from where we were at some dinner, and your great boss that you had at the time, wink, wink, somehow ruined our dinner. And I somehow in Kansas City, and I just brought this up with a bunch of Indians players when we were doing something, I missed the bus to that game. There's only in Kansas City. I missed the bus. I don't know how. We didn't stay out that late. As late as we wanted to, because there was something work-wise you got caught up in, and I got caught up in sitting at the hotel bar with Deke, who could break down and where every person worked and did at that bar, because Deke is unbelievable at hotel bars on Saturday nights on the road. And I'll never forget, I woke up, and it was just like in Cincinnati. I only missed the bus in my career twice. Once in Cincinnati, where you had to come wake me up in my room. That's a whole nother story. And you had to walk me to the game like I was 10 years old.
I did. It's true.
Eric Steinbach loved that story. And then the Kansas City game where Jerome went off and Josh went off, and your quarterback was Notre Dame's finest, Brady Quinn, who heard it, because I remember walking off. When we went to the bus, I limped off with Brady. But I'll never forget missing the bus in Kansas City and having to take, and you know when you got to bring like your suitcase, all your work stuff, and it's the walk of shame times 3,000, right? Yeah. When you got to walk into you usually come into the field with the team, you usually come in so nobody checks anything. Well, I was the embarrassing guy that had to come in a taxi. This is before Uber. Had to taxi to the field with my suitcase. There was no way of hiding that I was late or that I missed, because I had to go through the locker room with my suitcase and everything else. And I'll never forget the look Eric Mangini gave me. I just knew. Jim Brown is the one that said, "Hey, young man, where you going with all that luggage?" And I remember just going, "Jim Brown, please, this is not the time. You need to get some motherfucking cookies." It helped me.
Go have a cookie, Jim. Leave me alone.
Yes. 9 a.m., Jim. You know what's wrong with me. But that game I'll never forget. And we could break it down like it was, because Cribbs was crazy good in that game. And shout out to Cribbs. He's done great on the Browns coverage I've saw so far this year. It's been fun to hear him get hyped over very little. He's good at that.
That's one way to say it. Yeah. So anyway, point being, that's what's so cool about podcasts is you can find them for anything. Like the Kentucky Derby's on Saturday, right? And I'm not into it nearly like I am. It's not the first Saturday in May. The world's been turned upside down. But guess what? There's 3 college football games on Saturday. It would normally be the first Saturday with 80 college football games, Yeah. So somewhere out there's a Kentucky Derby podcast that I listen to every single year. It's usually a golf podcast, which I don't really know much about golf, other than which courses allow me to bring my own cooler and which ones don't. So, but I keep that bookmarked because every year this golf expert who's based in Kentucky apparently has a couple of guys that come on that are from Ireland that know everything about horses, and they talk about who's bred to run the distance and who's this and who's that. And, last year I had the second place finisher in the Kentucky Derby at 23-1 because I listened to this podcast. So,
wow.
In that I had the second place finisher, and then he won because maximum security got disqualified and all of that stuff. But
right.
Even though that was 16 months ago, it feels like 16 years. It feels like we're talking the story of Kansas City way back then. Yeah. I do remember that walk to the stadium in Cincinnati. And I was like, Joe, you have to go this way. Just follow the river. You're like, man, I've had a rough night. I don't know which way it's which.
Oh, that's one of the most embarrassing. That was a walk of shame. Oh my God.
That was a walk. That was a true walk of shame. Yes.
That was, and I might be wrong. Was that the Bengals game where DA threw like 8 interceptions in 4 seconds? It may have been.
Yeah, I mean, it could have been.
Yeah, we had a lot of trips to Cincinnati together.
Yeah, and I mean, and then for a while, that's where all my college buddies lived. So
right.
You know.
We had some good times. Yeah, the one time we went up in the hills, and I was like, "Ain't no black people up here. I got to be good."
We had a lot of good times up there. We had a lot of good times.
Some Oktoberfest fun when they would have that. They're doing that virtually in Cincinnati. The weird thing is you hear stories now. Like I heard like on the news the other day, like Oktoberfest festivals in Cincinnati will be done virtually. And the first thing I think of is Ocho Cinco walking through it with Braylon.
Just hanging out. Yeah, man. We're old. Like I was really glad you didn't acknowledge my birthday, quite frankly. But I will say to my friends that are listening, it was cool to get texts and hear from people that I don't normally get to see or only get to talk to every now and again. But my response was thank you, but we're done celebrating them. And a week from tomorrow is the first NFL game, so it's kind of.
Let me ask you something.
Okay.
Did you watch the college football game last week?
I did not. It ended up being late on Saturday night, and I had planned to watch it. At the last minute, we ended up just hanging out on a friend's patio, and I don't think the game started till 8:30 or 9. And when we got back from the patio at 9:30, 9:45, it was time to go to bed. So
it wasn't that good either. It was. It's a weird. And I don't want to complain.
Well, it was not to cut you off, but I think it was a precursor. You had guys who weren't allowed to play because they had exposure to COVID through roommates or through whatever.
Their long snapper couldn't play.
I read that their first 3 long snappers couldn't play. So,
yeah,
and
it was a problem.
yeah. So that's something to watch. We've talked about the Big Ten. I don't know what's going on, guys. I know there's political messages out there, and I know the Big Ten looks really bad as the other leagues get closer and closer to playing. Regardless of what happens, I have a hard time believing it would be anything other than a 14-0 or 0-14 decision, right? Like, I can't imagine that Ohio State's magically going to start playing on November 1st and the rest of the league isn't, but, who the hell knows?
It's an embarrassment. I mean, one way or the other, you just wish there was some because they had to know this is part of it. If you voted not to play, and like you said, we're not trying to get into the political parts of it. This is when you make a decision and you make a decision early, you got to stand by it one way or the other. Do you not? Like, look, I want Ohio State to play. I don't give a damn about Northwestern and Nebraska or anybody else. I want to see Ohio State play. And to me, like, you can't. I'm not going to say it that way. Just to me, you knew you made this decision, right? And now all of a sudden, as you said, you see other leagues getting ready to play, you see other teams playing, and it's almost like the embarrassment's already over your face, and you're shuffling backwards. Are you bending to the pressure of the parents? Are you bending to the pressure of the Nebraska, people trying to sue you? I don't know. The one thing I will say, and I know Zach said this in the last podcast that we had, I don't even want to be political about it. It's not the commissioner that had the final say. There was a vote by all the you said this the last time. I'm only repeating it because I feel like, and I know people take information for how they want to take it nowadays. No one really cares about what the truth is one way or the other. But Kevin Warren did not make this decision solely on Kevin Warren. He didn't do it by himself. This was done by everybody else, but everybody only blames him is what I don't understand.
Yeah, well, because he's made the target, but as we talked about and as we talked about last week, like somebody has to be out in front of it, right? It's been a clumsy response. It's been bad. They were the first to announce, right? Well, the MAC was first, but of the Power Fives, like that took some balls. My question for both sides would be, what's changed so much 3 weeks later, which part of me makes me think this whole thing is just posturing. But then you hear, like, Ohio State's president and AD, who would be the two most visible among all their peers, are on the record saying, we hope there's a path back, right? Like, not third-hand rumors. Like, they're saying it. So I don't know what's going on. I know it's a mess.
I feel bad for the kids. That's what I'm going to continue to say because that's what, it's like, all right, Andre and Zach are mad because we don't have our favorite pastime on TV. We still have beer, though. I feel bad for the kids. And you brought this up with me. The parents that are standing up for their kids, I get it. We're irrational for our children. That's just part of being a parent. You will irrationally yell and scream for them, even if it's not right, because it's your flesh and blood. I get that. I'm not against that at all. I would fight the same way for my kids, I'm sure. But I feel like, unfortunately, kids are the pawns in this political fight about we still don't know what the hell is going on.
No.
I mean, look at baseball right now, and God bless it. And we're getting through this season, and fingers crossed, bank account, fingers crossed for me. We can make it through this month of September, and I can put all my money in the bank and go hibernate until when normalcy comes back, if it ever comes back. But Major League Baseball knows that thinking that we can just keep doing things how we're going to do it and get through the playoffs is a joke. So they're trying to bubble up. Like, they see the NBA, they're like, You know what? We get to the last week of the season, and we know who the playoff teams are. We're putting you on hotels, and we ain't letting nobody near you.
That's right.
And that's just part of how this sucker is going to go.
Well,
we're going to send half of you guys to California, half of you to Texas, and ain't nobody leaving until their team's eliminated.
Yeah. Well, I think like this. I think as of yesterday or 2 days ago, there was 2 players in the whole NFL on the COVID reserve list, right?
Right.
The facts are, like, everybody's been busy. Everybody's been locked in, trying to make teams, trying to catch up, trying to have practice every day they're allowed. Well, starting this week, like, the veterans get a couple days off because they clear everybody out and they make the roster decisions. And then they start shipping things around, and you really start getting to work on Sunday or Monday for the following Sunday. Well, guys are going to let their guard down,
Yeah, they're gonna try to they're gonna go see their girls. They're gonna see family members. They're gonna, how it is, and you can't blame them. They're human beings.
No, right?
We're all human, right?
Right. No, I was just doing
some of the younger.
Well, I was just doing my roster projection this morning, and I was like, this team knows who its top 2 quarterbacks are. Like, they don't need a third, but in the COVID world, you do, because
I don't know. I was listening 850 the other morning. Sounds like they don't even know who their starter is.
Well, we could talk about that in a minute, but they know who their starter is. Let's put it that way. They know who their starter is, and we'll see. I think the offense they're going to run 2 Sundays from now in Baltimore will make Jim France proud. That's probably how it should be. So
I'm okay with that, Zach.
No, it's exactly what it should be. Yes.
Yeah, yes. Man, you got 2 of the best premier running backs in the game. There's so many questions, and passing games are all about timing and all about spacing and all those other things. The smart coaches, and I don't know Stefanski. I haven't been to a practice. I've watched a little Building Browns, a little bit of this and that. To me, hell yeah, I would get Jim France and Jonathan Stone out if I was Kevin Stefanski, and I'd be running veers and everything else until I was comfortable enough to play. And you would like to think that it would keep injuries down if you can run the football, control the clock. All very not sexy words to use in football in 2020, right? But it may win you a couple football games till you figure out who the hell you are.
Well, 2 things. All these jackasses that say, well, blah, 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 blah. There's no correlation between running it 25 times and whatever. Well, that is the best way to help your defense, right, is keep them off the field.
Yes.
Get those guys those touches. And when you have a 21-year-old rookie left tackle with no preseason, and you might have a 21-year-old rookie center with no preseason, the best way to get that line going and get them some confidence and get everything moving is just to run block and keep it simple, right?
Yeah,
and
no doubt.
The thing with Treader, and I don't know, where he stands. Can he get back? I mean, from a mental standpoint, as long as he gets back, he can play. But if he's not ready for next week, that second game's in 4 days. There's 1 real practice. If you need him to get out there and go through practice at least at 75% speed and know that he can trust the knee and know that he can make the reads in real time, then I'm not sure that the second game's a given either, right? So so that is complicated. I'll just say this about camp, and then we'll talk Clevinger trade, and we'll get out of here. It hasn't been pretty, especially offensively. A lot of that is understandable. A lot of that is expected. I'm not writing anyone off on anything, short-term or long-term. Because, I've had training camp observations before, some of them that are really, really right on, some of them that aren't, but even some of them that are right on for weeks 1, 2, and 3 get flipped because that's the course of an NFL season. You ride the wave,
For
teams
sure.
adjust. Teams know you inside and out, your strengths. And if you're not always evolving, if you're not always getting better, and you're not developing your own identity where all your players, not just your quarterback, are getting comfortable in what you want to do, then you're getting left behind. We know here in Cleveland it's been getting left behind more than it's been anything else. That's led to the constant change. That's been the reality. We'll see. Has the quarterback looked good? No. Anybody that says that he has is lying to you. That really doesn't matter because he's 0-0. The head coach is 0-0. The left tackle 0-0. We'll see how it goes. And even if they get shelled in Baltimore, and they might, what does that really mean in the grand scheme? It just means that game's over with, and they're on to the next part of their growth. I mean,
Well, we learned that last year.
Yeah,
right?
well,
More than
25 practices or 30 practices that were lost. This is where all the change catches up with the Browns, right? But no season has ever been over, good or bad, on September 18th or September 26th or whenever the hell it is. You can beat the Bengals. You can certainly beat the Washington football team. And boy, do they might have the worst roster in the whole league. So, you can lose, and then you can just be fine right after that.
I think this is going to be an interesting year. And look, the way it's set up, it should help veteran teams. That's just the reality of it. It's going to be a struggle. It's going to be a struggle for teams that are trying to implement new things. I think that's why you and I are sitting here saying, dummy it up, find your best, 5-10 running plays. Hell, sometimes your best running play is the same running play. You just run it right, run it left, flip the line, give a different look. You got a left tackle that's never played left tackle, and suddenly you're going to go and put him against. Look, the one good thing they have, and we can preview the game next week. I almost said Earl Campbell. Might as well be Earl Campbell. I then almost said Earl Little. I got the wrong Earl.
Little Earl.
That's a obscure Browns figure that we could tell good stories about.
Yeah.
The situation at safety for Baltimore is something that you'd like to take advantage of, and because of your receivers, play action should work, and you should be able to suck them in if you can get a couple good runs going early. But look, the defense for the Browns changed drastically after that Thursday night game against Pittsburgh, and it wasn't because of the helmet was thrown. It was because the guy that threw the helmet was no longer allowed to play. If he's healthy, he's your defensive savior, and I hate putting it on one guy. But his talent states it, his contract states it, where you drafted stated it, and with the injuries they have in the back, and with the injuries they have at linebacker, we can do shows, and I know it's sexy to do shows about Baker and what he can and cannot do, and what he can and cannot see, and what comments have been made about him. But Zach, if you can't score, if you can't stop another team, it doesn't matter who you have at quarterback. And Myles Garrett, to me, is going to have to put on a Superman cape for the first 3 or 4 weeks to keep them in games and put pressure on a quarterback, because I just don't see defensively. I heard Bull jump Daryl Ryder a couple of days ago because Ryder was talking about the Browns missing significant guys. And Bull yelled and screamed at him like he was yelling at his son, said, "How do you know they're significant?" And I thought it was just a terrible – and Bull, it's nothing personal. It's just there's a conversation. And I don't stand up for Daryl very often, but I stand up for what's right and what's wrong. And Daryl was just simply saying, look, man, these are the guys that this team said we're going to start on this defense. These are the guys that they pegged as defensive starters, or guys that were going to play a lot of minutes. I got where Bull was coming from. Bull was basically saying the whole defense is trash anyway. Who knows if you're losing something. But when an NFL team pencils in certain guys to take 60, 70 snaps a night, and suddenly you don't have those 60 or 70 snap guys on your roster able to play, that's a huge step backwards, whether we know if these rookies can play or not. Right, Zach?
Yeah.
Those
it's
guys
huge.
are the guys that they were going to – it's huge. And Daryl was right. Like, that's huge. Whether they can play or not, that's a whole other story. But for the coaching staff who has had to work out of their basements and everywhere else, we don't know if Delphin is a star or not. But they had to find out, because that's their job, because that's who they drafted. That's who they were going to cultivate to be parts of their defense. I know it's easier and it's sexier to talk about number 6. To me, I worry that they give up 500 yards a game if Myles Garrett doesn't have that cape on. That's my biggest concern right now. I know the offense will be what it'll be, but Zach, if they don't stop anybody, it doesn't matter.
You're right. All those are valid points. I'm going to save a thought on Earl Little for next week, because that's more of a season preview. But I'm going to ask you one thing right now before we talk baseball. They got to do right. Everybody has to help number 6, right? And they've done on paper they've done a phenomenal job of helping him with. And I'm telling you, if you guys have fantasy football drafts like we do this weekend, draft Austin Hooper because my God, he's a big horse, and Baker already loves him. Right?
I've heard the one they draft is pretty nice too.
Yeah, he's skinny. He's got a long way to go, but man, he's very sure-handed, very smart kid. They can't praise him enough for what he's doing to try to get ready. Is he physically strong enough right now? You know,
but you would hope in the red zone though they got enough targets to be able to score touchdowns.
I think the reason they're not trading Njoku is because they can put him out there and at least ask him to block the guy in front of him the first 4 weeks of the season, right? And know that he'll at least give it a go. But let me ask you this. If you had to bet that $5 bill in your wallet right now, you only get to pick one. Who's going to have a TV job in 5 years, me or Baker Mayfield? Who's your $5 going on?
Baker Mayfield.
Mine too. Let's talk about baseball.
Baker will be doing TV next to Brady Quinn, next to all the other former Browns. Hey, I don't want to. I'm not going to do no Baker slander until the Baker slander's there. He's in shape now, supposedly, but he's got a lot of ground to make up. So we'll leave it at that. We'll see. But what Goldhammer did the other day on radio was irresponsible, and it's part of the problem we have with the media. Come on, man. If you don't do that. That was lowbrow. I'm going to say something most want to. You're better than that. All right, we can move on.
Yeah. So anyway, the Indians traded Mike Clevinger. There's a lot of layers to every decision made in pro sports, right? Mm-hmm. There's certainly a lot to this one. I don't know any of the guys that they got back. I know one of them is their starting left fielder, right? But he's still a young player. I know they upgraded the bullpen, right?
Quantrill's.
You know, Dre, I don't know. I'm trying to think of the way to frame it, but you know what I'm asking. I mean, did Mike Clevinger get traded because of Chicago or not?
It's a convoluted question. I mean, that's part. It would be a lie to say that didn't play into it somewhat. Is it the main culprit of why they traded him? No. He was going to get traded at some point in time, regardless. The Indians are who they are, and they have somehow, and this is one of those conversations that could take an hour, but we'll make it short. I mean, as I had to tell my daughter the other day, this is what's been happening with the Indians since the 90s. So for us to stand on top of a mountain and claim cheap or this or that, this is who they are. And I think most intelligent fans understand, whether we like it or not, financially, it's hard for them to compete versus everyone else. In a year where you don't have fans in the stands and you have no idea when fans will be in the stands next year, and you already were financially backpedaling like you're getting ready to take on an NFL offense, this just plays into that. Clev was going to get traded at some point in time in the next 6 months, is the best way I could say it. If he made it through the season, there was a good chance in the offseason he was going to be moved because he was going to make more money. Is there multiple and layers to why they would move him when they could have had him for 2 more years? Yes. Part of it, I would say, is, and this is unfair to him, but part of it is his herky-jerky motion and the fear that there could be some injuries with those knees and arms because of how he pitches. He was dealing with a balky knee most of this season already. The influence, I guess is the word that I'll use, that he could have had over other guys played into it. Look, I'll be honest. I'm in a weird situation because I like Mike. I know Mike really well. And I'll know Mike really well the rest of my life. There's no doubt in my mind. My daughters know his daughters. My kids, so I'll know Mike. And in my job, and Cleve and I had this conversation the other day, and I told him, my job is to get to know these guys as best I can, to tell their stories and to tell who and what they are and how, what makes it work for them and what they're struggling through. It's not my job to tell every personal tidbit that I know about them, but to do my job the right way, I've got to find the 26, 30 stories and tell them. And I try to do that the best I can. Cleve is a really good dude that does some stupid shit sometimes. Most of my friends fit that category, me included. So to answer your question, what happened in Chicago? Unfortunate. As I told Clev, he can let this be his story, or he can make his story way bigger than that. I won't tell you exactly what I told him the other night before he was traded, but basically said, hey, this would be a good time to I don't want to Laura Ingram him, but I basically did. I was like, this might be a good I did. I'm being honest. And he would tell you. He'll tell you at some point in time if he comes on this podcast. I just said, hey, man, being the person that I am and knowing you, it'd be a good time to stop tweeting, stop talking, and just go out and pitch and show everybody who you are as a pitcher and go make your money and go enjoy life. And he will. And at the same time, the Indians have, what they do with pitching is tremendous. And I know this not because of what I do every day at work. I know this because of talking to other people around baseball who are trying to crack the code that the Indians have in figuring out young pitching.
Sure.
That's the God honest truth. If you want something to brag about for the Indians, I'm telling you, I get scouts, people that work in front offices, people that make a lot of money. They're trying to figure out what the hell the Indians are doing to continue cultivating and finding these young pitchers and turning these pitchers into what they are. They think Zach Plesac can be as good or if not better than what they have in Clev. They got a couple other kids coming. Tristan McKenzie's story has been phenomenal. So, they moved from a strength. I would like, just like everybody else, for them to get an outfielder that can hit 300, because if you get an outfielder that hits 300, you take the pressure off of Frankie and everybody else, you got a chance to play the last game of the season. They're taking their risk that they can get to the last game of the season with the best pitching in baseball, and we'll have to see. I mean, they're like second in baseball in run differential, and I know you fall asleep half the time listening to Hammy, but to say the Indians are in the top 3, top 4 in run differential, considering they barely can score 5 nights out of 7, tells you they got something special if they can just figure out how to score 5 runs a night.
Makes sense. All right, one question, and then we'll get out of here. The trade was made at like lunchtime on Monday, right?
Yeah. It was a little before lunch.
So this is my assumption. Tell me, so this can be a yes or no question.
Wait. But here's the dumb part. You and I were getting ready to do a podcast. I just left the chiropractor because my back's still killing me. And I was good. And then I texted you. I was like, well, and then you're like, oh, I forgot about the trade deadline. And I was like, oh, don't worry. They're going to make a move with the Padres. And literally as I texted you that, you're like, yeah, that just popped up on Twitter. And I'm like, shit.
You just, you know what? My question is canceled because you just provided the perfect way to get out of here. Your back is killing you because you're old, and we're talking about the Mike Clevinger trade. So that melds together the two things that are undefeated. And on that note, we'll talk to you next time. For Andre, I'm Zach. We'll talk to you. Thanks. Shout outs to Scene, to Honeymoon, and to American Fireworks. We'll talk to you next time on A to Z.
Konnichiwa, chiropractor.